They said the old man had no past. But the night he collapsed in the middle of the street, murmuring a name no one had ever heard before, was the first time anyone realized he wasn't who they thought he was. For 20 years, people in the quiet town had known him simply as Mr. Hale, a gentle, soft-spoken man who lived alone near the edge of the woods, always wearing the same dark coat, always carrying the same battered metal tin in his hand. Nobody questioned him. Nobody bothered him. He fixed radios, clocks, and typewriters for a few coins, and he walked home every evening before sunset, as if darkness brought something he didn't want to remember. But that night, everything changed. It was close to midnight when the thunderstorm rolled over the town, sheets of cold rain whipping the streets. A young grocery clerk named Daniel was locking the shop when he saw Mr. Hale stumbling down the road, drenched, shaking, clutching the tin against his chest. Daniel called out to him, but the old man didn't hear. His lips were moving rapidly, whispering something over and over, a word Daniel had never heard before. Then Mr. Hale fell. Daniel rushed to him, tried to help him up, but the old man grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. His eyes, usually soft and distant, were suddenly fierce, terrified, alive with memories long buried. "Don't let them take it," he gasped. Who's after you?" Daniel asked. But the old man didn't answer. Rain poured into his face as his grip loosened. The tin slipped from his hands and hit the pavement with a metallic crack. When Daniel picked it up, he felt the weight of something inside, something that slid and clinked like metal. Before he could open it, the ambulance lights washed over them, and Mr. Hale was taken away. The doctors at the town hospital said the old man survived, but he kept drifting in and out of consciousness. He spoke in broken sentences, sometimes in English, sometimes in another language no one could identify. Nurses heard him cry out in his sleep, shouting names, numbers, and coordinates. At times his hands moved as if gripping a rifle. Other times he whispered sobbing apologies into the air, as if begging forgiveness from ghosts. 2 days passed before anyone realized that the metal tin, placed on Daniel's kitchen table, held the answers. The moment Daniel opened it, his breath caught. Inside were 3 military dog tags. Each belonged to a soldier who fought in a different war, and each tag carried a different name. None of the names matched Mr. Hale. The first tag was battered and rusted. The chain snapped. Blood type, O+. Country, United States. Year, 1943. A soldier from World War II. The second tag gleamed slightly, as if newer. Year, 1951. A soldier from the Korean War. The third was the most shocking. Year, 1965. A soldier from the Vietnam War. 3 wars. 3 identities. 1 man. Daniel felt a chill slide through him. Was the old man a fraud? A deserter? A spy? Or something even darker? Someone who lived in shadows, wearing new identities the way other men changed their clothes? He found more at the bottom of the tin. A folded photograph, stiff with age. In it stood 5 young soldiers in uniform, arms over each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. And in the center, unmistakably, was Mr. Hale, 50 years younger, harder eyes, jaw set like stone. But on the back of the photograph was a single sentence, written in shaky, fading ink. "Only one of us made it out." Daniel felt his throat tighten. What had happened to the others? He took the tin to the hospital, but when he entered the old man's room, he stopped dead. 3 men in dark suits were already there, quiet, stern, emotionless. Federal agents. One of them closed a file as soon as he saw Daniel. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "This is Mr. Hale." "I know him," Daniel protested. "No," the man corrected in a low, cold voice. "You don't." Another agent pulled a chair closer to the old man's bed. "We've been looking for him for a long time. He disappeared decades ago." "Why?" Daniel asked. "That," the agent said, "is classified." The old man stirred on the bed. His eyelids fluttered. For a moment he seemed lost, a scared child trapped in a failing body. Then he saw Daniel. A fragile smile formed. "You kept it safe," he whispered. Daniel stepped closer. "Who are you?" he asked softly. "What's your real name?" The old man looked at him for a long moment. eyes full of storms, regret, and secrets heavy enough to crush a life. Then he slowly raised a trembling finger toward the tin in Daniel's hands. "Not one name," he murmured. "3. Daniel felt the room tighten. One of the agents leaned forward. "Tell him," he said. "He deserves to know. After all these years, it's time." The old man drew a shaky breath. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I was born as Elias Ward. That was my first life. The one that ended in the Ardennes in the winter of '44. He coughed, wincing, gripping the sheets. Daniel waited, heart pounding. "And after I died," the old man said, looking straight into Daniel's eyes, "they brought me back." The room went silent. Daniel's skin prickled. "What do you mean, brought you back?" The old man's voice trembled as he continued. "They erased who I was. They gave me a new name, a new face, the new purpose. And they sent me to another war. Then another, until there was nothing left of the man I once was." Daniel stepped back, stunned. "You fought in 3 wars, he whispered. The old man nodded weakly. "And no one ever knew my real name," he said. "Not even me until now." He closed his eyes, as if the memories were finally too heavy to hold. Daniel stood frozen, realizing he was standing beside a man who had lived more than one life, who had disappeared into history again and again, leaving behind nothing but a trail of dog tags and ghosts. And this was just the beginning of his story. For hours after leaving the hospital, Daniel couldn't shake the weight of what he'd heard. The rain had stopped, but the sky still hung low and heavy, as if the world itself sensed the burden of the old man's memories. Elias Ward, a name that belonged to the past, yet somehow still breathing through the fragile body lying in that hospital bed. He walked home with the metal tin in his hands, unable to resist opening it again once he stepped inside his tiny living room. The 3 dog tags clinked softly, metallic echoes of 3 different lives. Every scratch, every dent, every faded number seemed to whisper fragments of the man's journey, somewhere between duty, survival, and something darker that the agents had refused to explain. Daniel sat at his small table, the dim lamp casting long shadows. The old photograph lay in front of him, 5 young men smiling, unaware of the decades of silence that would follow. Elias stood in the center, shoulders squared, jaw clenched. A man who looked ready for war even before the war had begun. Daniel turned the photo over again, tracing the words with his thumb. "Only one of us made it out." The sentence felt heavy, almost accusatory, as if the other were watching him from another lifetime, demanding to know why he held their memory now. He wondered what the old man had meant when he said he had died in the Ardennes. No one comes back from death. No one changes identities 3 times. No one fights in 3 wars and disappears without a trace, unless someone helped him vanish. Daniel's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. He stiffened. It was nearly midnight again, and no one ever came to visit him this late. He slowly approached, peering through the peephole. 2 of the agents from the hospital stood outside. Daniel hesitated before opening the door a crack. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying to keep the unease out of his voice. "We need to talk," the taller agent said. His expression was unreadable. "About the man you know as Mr. Hale." Daniel stepped aside, allowing them inside. The agents didn't sit. They stood like sentinels, eyes scanning the room, evaluating every detail. "You're wondering who he really is," the tall agent said, his voice low. "You're not the first." Daniel swallowed. He said his name was Elias Ward. "That was one of his names," the second agent replied. "The one he was born with. The others were assigned." Daniel's pulse quickened. Assigned? By who? The agent exchanged a glance with his partner. "By us," he said. "The government." Daniel stared at them, stunned. "You mean he was some kind of spy?" The agent shook his head. "Not exactly. He was part of a covert rehabilitation program after World War II. Soldiers who were injured, presumed dead, or left with no identification were sometimes recruited for missions where official records couldn't exist." Daniel felt the air shift. The room seemed to shrink. "So you erased their identities?" "We gave them new ones," the taller agent said. New names, new histories, new purposes. They were men who had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain if they served again. Daniel's mind raced. That's why he said he was brought back. He wasn't talking about a miracle. He was talking about you. The agent nodded once. Elias Ward was pulled from the snow in the Ardennes with no dog tags, no documents, and severe memory loss. To the world, he died that winter. But we rebuilt him, trained him, sent him where we needed him. Korea, Daniel whispered. Vietnam. 3 wars. He was one of our best, the agent said. Invisible. Untraceable. A man who officially didn't exist. Daniel looked at the dog tags on his table. 3 lives, each lived in silence, each abandoned when the next war called. Why didn't he ever tell anyone? Men like him don't talk, the agent replied quietly. They carry their battles alone. Daniel felt something twist inside him. Anger, sympathy, confusion. And now, why are you here? The agent's jaw tightened. Because we think he's remembering too much. Memories he was never supposed to hold on to. Daniel frowned. He deserves to know who he is. That's not for him to decide, the tall agent said. And not for you. Daniel clenched his fists. He's not your possession. He's a human being. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed the agent's face. Regret. You don't understand. Those memories are dangerous. Not just to him. To others. There are operations, missions, files that have never been declassified. If he speaks, even by accident, it could unravel things you can't imagine. Daniel felt a cold chill. So what? You want to silence him? The agent didn't answer. The silence was louder than any threat. After a moment, the taller agent stepped closer. We came to warn you. Don't push him to remember more. Don't encourage him. Don't look for more answers. Daniel stared at him. And if I do? The agent's voice was calm, almost gentle. Then you'll make things difficult for everyone, including him. They left without another word, disappearing into the night as quietly as they had arrived. The door clicked shut behind them, but their presence lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. Daniel stood there for a long time, staring at the 3 dog tags glinting under the lamplight. He knew he should listen. He knew danger when he saw it, but something deeper tugged at him, a sense of responsibility, of loyalty, of injustice. Elias Ward had lived 3 lives for a country that couldn't even remember his real name. A man who had been shaped, erased, rebuilt, and discarded again and again. If he was finally remembering who he truly was, then Daniel couldn't turn away. Not now. He picked up the tin and closed it gently. Tomorrow, he decided, he would go back to the hospital. He needed answers, and he would get them from the only man who had lived them. The hospital corridor smelled of disinfectant and fading echoes. Daniel walked slowly toward room 214, clutching the metal tin under his arm. He had barely slept, lying awake replaying every word the agents had said, every warning, every hint of a truth buried under decades of secrets. But beneath all of that was something else. The image of the old man's trembling smile when he called him by his real name. Elias. A name buried under 3 wars and a lifetime of silence. When Daniel reached the door, he hesitated. Something felt off. The hallway was too quiet. The curtain on the small window in Elias's door was pulled shut, though yesterday it had been left open. Daniel gently pushed the door. Inside, 2 nurses stood beside the bed, adjusting 4 lines. Elias lay perfectly still, his chest rising in shallow breaths. His face looked pale, the lines deeper than before. His lips were moving slightly, as if whispering to someone only he could see. One of the nurses turned to Daniel with a tired look. "You're the young man who brought him in, right?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "How is he?" The nurse exhaled. "He didn't sleep much last night. Kept waking up, calling out names. Sometimes he spoke in a language I didn't recognize. We had to give him a mild sedative." Daniel stepped closer, eyes fixed on the old man's fragile form. "Is he conscious now?" "Barely," the nurse replied. "He drifts in and out. But if you talk to him, he might respond. Just be gentle." Daniel pulled a chair beside the bed and sat, placing the tin quietly on his lap. Elias's eyelids fluttered at the sound. Slowly, his eyes opened, cloudy and unfocused at first, then sharpening when they found Daniel. "You came back," he whispered weakly. Daniel leaned forward. "Of course. I need to understand who you were. What happened to you?" A faint smile tugged at Elias's lips. "Careful," he murmured. "Some things are better left buried." Daniel shook his head. "Not your life. Not your name." Elias looked at the ceiling for a long moment, his breath trembling. "Names," he said softly, "are just masks. You wear one long enough, you forget there's a face underneath." Daniel hesitated, then reached into the tin and lifted the oldest dog tag, the rusted one from 1943. Elias stared at it, and something shifted in his expression. Pain. Recognition. Loss. "That was me," he said. "The boy who wanted to be a hero." Daniel waited. Elias's eyes drifted shut for a moment, as if gathering the strength to lift memories heavy as mountains. When he opened them again, he wasn't in the hospital anymore, not in his mind. He was somewhere far away. "It was winter," he began. "The Ardennes. Snow so deep it swallowed men whole. We were cut off. Surrounded. My unit was down to 9 men, then 7, then 3. I was one of them. I remember gunfire echoing like thunder in the trees, the cold so sharp it felt like it was carving into our bones." Daniel listened, unblinking. "I was hit," Elias whispered. "Not bad at first. But then the cold finished what the bullet started. My friends dragged me as far as they could. We hid in a crater. I told them to leave me, but they refused. Brothers, that's what they called themselves. Brothers." A tear slid from the corner of his eye. "They died before dawn." Daniel swallowed, his throat tight. "When they found me," Elias continued, "I wasn't breathing. They marked me as dead, sent my body to a field station. But apparently, I had other plans." His lips curved in a weak, humorless smile. "When I woke up, I didn't know who I was. Couldn't speak. Couldn't even remember my own face. That's when they came." Daniel stiffened. "The agents." "No," Elias corrected. "Before them. Men in gray coats. They weren't soldiers. They took men like me, lost men, broken men, men who had been forgotten by their units, and they offered us a chance. A new identity. A way to keep serving. They said we were useful because we had no past left to hold us down." Daniel clenched his jaw. "They took advantage of you." Elias exhaled. "Or saved me. I still don't know which." He winced, holding his side. Daniel reached to steady him. "They tested us," Elias said. "Trained us. Built us into ghosts. We went where official soldiers couldn't go. Did things that couldn't be written down. And when the Korean War started, they sent me back into fire." Daniel's heart pounded. The idea of a man fighting in a war after losing everything in a previous one felt cruel, unimaginable. But Elias spoke with the calm of someone who had already made peace with pain. "I became someone else," Elias murmured. "Then someone else again. Each time they gave me a new name, a new uniform, a new story. A clean slate. But a slate wiped too many times becomes thin. Cracked." His voice trembled. "I started remembering pieces. A face here. A sound there. A smell. A snowfall. But I was never allowed to ask. Not until Vietnam, not until everything went wrong." Daniel leaned closer, pulse quickening. "What happened there?" Elias's eyes unfocused, drifting somewhere deep inside. "My unit was ambushed," he whispered. 4 of us. We were surrounded. The others, they didn't make it. I escaped. I don't know how. Maybe I wasn't supposed to." He looked directly at Daniel. "That photograph you saw," he said. "Those men were the closest thing I ever had to a family. But they died believing I was one of them. And I died over and over again every time I was forced to become someone new." Daniel slowly reached for Elias's hand. It felt cold, frail, trembling. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," he said softly. Elias looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. "That's what scares me," he whispered. "Because if I start remembering everything, they'll come for me." Daniel's breath caught. "Who?" Elias swallowed hard. The ones who made me. Before Daniel could speak, the door opened. Not a nurse. Not a doctor. The same two agents stepped into the room. Their faces were grim. "We told you not to encourage him," the taller one said quietly. Daniel stood up, anger rising. "He deserves to know." The second agent shook his head. "You don't understand. The memories he's accessing, they aren't supposed to exist anymore." Elias tried to sit up, fear flickering across his face. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder to steady him. "You stay away from him," Daniel said firmly. The tall agent stepped closer. "Daniel, listen carefully. If he keeps remembering, he won't be the only one in danger." Elias squeezed Daniel's hand weakly. "Don't let them take me," he whispered. Daniel turned to face the agents fully. "No," he said. "I won't." The room fell into a tense silence. And then Elias whispered one final sentence, one that froze all three of them. "I remember the mission they buried." The agents exchanged a sharp, alarmed glance. Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. Whatever Elias had remembered, it wasn't just dangerous. It was the reason they wanted him silenced. The hospital room felt smaller than ever. Rain had returned outside, tapping softly against the window, as if the storm itself knew what was happening inside. Elias Ward lay in the bed, pale and fragile, yet his eyes burned with a fierce intensity. He was no longer the old man the town had known. He was a soldier again, haunted by memories he had tried to bury for decades. Daniel stayed by his side, refusing to leave. Every muscle in his body ached from the weight of knowing how much danger they were in. Yet he couldn't abandon the man who had fought 3 wars and lived under 3 different names. "They're watching," Elias whispered. "Every move I make, every word I speak. They don't want the past to wake." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Then we have to be smarter than them. We have to find a way to protect you while you remember." Elias shook his head, eyes glinting with fear and sorrow. "It's not just me anymore. The memories, they hold evidence. Evidence of operations that never should have existed. Men who disappeared. Files that were destroyed. The kind of secrets that, if revealed, could destroy lives." Daniel nodded, understanding the gravity. He had seen glimpses of war, of spies, of hidden histories in movies and books. But this, living, breathing reality was different. The cost of remembering was higher than he could have imagined. "They'll come for the tin," Elias said suddenly, voice low and urgent. "Everything they gave me, everything they erased, it's in there. The dog tags, the photographs, proof." Daniel looked down at the metal tin in his hands, now feeling heavier than the heaviest object in the world. He had to make a choice. Protect it, keep it hidden, or risk it falling into the wrong hands. A soft click at the door made both of them look up. The agents had returned. Their faces were harder, more determined. "We warned you," said the tall one. "You're putting him at risk. And yourself." Daniel stood, holding the tin tightly. "He's not yours. He's not a weapon. He's a man." Elias coughed, weak but defiant. "Let him be. He's the only one who can help me remember without fear." The agents exchanged glances, and for the first time, Elias and Daniel noticed something behind the stern expressions. A flicker of doubt, of unease. "We can't control what he remembers anymore," the second agent admitted, voice low. "If he starts recalling certain events, it could unravel everything we tried to cover up." Daniel's heart raced. "Then let him. He deserves the truth." Elias's hand shook as he reached for the tin. Daniel placed his hand over it, steadying him. "We'll do this together," he whispered. He opened the tin carefully. The dog tags gleamed under the dim hospital light. Elias picked up the oldest one first, from the Ardennes. His lips moved, whispering the name of a comrade long dead. Each memory came with a sharp, painful clarity. The snow, the gunfire, the faces of men who had trusted him with their lives. Then came Korea. The memories were brutal, raw, unforgiving. He remembered ambushes in the mountains, the freezing nights, the sounds of men screaming. And Vietnam, oh Vietnam. The heat, the jungle, the terror, the moments when he had thought he would never survive another day. Daniel watched, heart pounding, as Elias relived decades of war in minutes. The old man's body trembled, sweat beading his forehead. His voice cracked with sorrow and rage, yet each word, each recollection was a step toward reclaiming the life that had been stolen from him. Suddenly, Elias froze. His eyes widened in panic. They're here. Daniel looked toward the door. No one had entered yet, but the air shifted, a tension crawling along the walls. Elias's breathing quickened. They're inside me, memories, implanted watchers. I can feel them. Daniel gripped his shoulder. Focus on me. On the room. You're safe here. But Elias shook his head violently. No. They are everywhere. In the streets, the files, the people who smile, but lie. I can see them, Daniel. They follow me in every reflection. The old man clutched the tin to his chest, as if it was the only anchor keeping him tied to reality. Daniel held him, whispering, "You're alive. You're here. You're not alone." A sudden crash from the hallway made them both jump. The hospital lights flickered. Daniel rushed to the door. Outside, he saw the agents grappling with another figure, someone unknown, dressed in black, moving with precision and speed. Elias's eyes widened further. They've come to take everything, to erase me again. Daniel realized then that the warnings had been real. They weren't bluffing. The old man's memories were dangerous, not just to the world, but to his own life. He grabbed Elias's hand. "We're not letting them. Not this time. Not after everything you've survived." The unknown figure darted into the room, swift and silent. The taller agent shouted, "Stop him." But before anyone could react, Elias's eyes locked on the intruder. Recognition flickered. A face from the past. A man he had known in a mission that should have remained buried. A mission that ended in blood, fire, and betrayal. Daniel felt the tension spike, the room electric with danger. And in that moment, Elias Ward was no longer an old man in a hospital bed. He was a soldier again, a ghost from 3 wars, facing the shadows of a life that had never truly ended. And Daniel understood, with terrifying clarity, that the storm outside wasn't just rain. It was a warning. What was coming next would decide not only Elias's fate, but the fate of every secret buried in the ashes of decades of war. The storm outside had grown violent, lashing against the hospital windows, as if nature itself sensed the chaos inside. Elias Ward sat upright in his bed, gripping the tin tightly. Daniel stayed by his side, every muscle tense, eyes darting to the door. Outside, footsteps echoed, too many, too fast. The agents had failed to anticipate this. Someone else had arrived. Elias's eyes, once soft with age, now burned with the intensity of a soldier reliving battles, dodging ambushes, and facing enemies who had been waiting decades for him to falter. "They know," he whispered. "They've tracked me. Every life I've lived, every identity, they've traced it back to me." Daniel's hand tightened around his. "We can fight this. We'll protect you." Elias shook his head. "No, Daniel. Protection is temporary. What comes next is inevitable." Before Daniel could respond, the door burst open. Figures in black moved swiftly, trained, efficient. The agents reacted instantly, trying to intercept, but the intruders were fast, ghosts trained in the same shadows Elias had once inhabited. Elias's face paled, but then a spark ignited. He set the tin down, his trembling hands replaced with the steadiness of a man who had survived the impossible. He wasn't just Elias Ward anymore. He was a soldier of 3 wars, a man who had learned to act when survival demanded it. The first intruder lunged toward him. Elias dodged instinctively, a reflex older than memory. Daniel froze, watching in horror and awe. Elias grabbed the nearest object, a chair, and swung it with precision honed in jungles, mountains, and battlefields far from this peaceful town. The agent struggled to regain control. "Ward, focus," the tall one shouted. Elias's eyes flicked to Daniel. "Stay back. This is my fight." Chaos erupted. The room became a blur of movement, chairs overturned, bodies colliding, shouts and grunts filling the air. But amid the violence, Daniel noticed something remarkable. Elias wasn't fighting blindly. Every move, every block, every counterattack was a memory, a skill retained from decades of missions that should have been erased. One of the intruders froze for a second too long. Elias lunged, pinning the man against the wall. His voice was a growl, older than his body. "You won't take what's mine. You won't erase me again." Daniel realized then that this was more than survival. Elias wasn't just defending his life. He was reclaiming it. Every name he had worn, every life he had been forced to live, it had all led to this moment. The remaining intruders hesitated. The agents moved to block them, but Elias's focus was singular. He knew the tactics, the strategies, the weaknesses of men trained like him. And in that room, under the storm's fury, he was unstoppable. Finally, the intruders retreated, realizing they had underestimated a man who had died and been reborn more times than they could comprehend. Elias slumped into his chair, exhausted but victorious. His breaths came in ragged gasps. Daniel rushed to his side, gripping his arm. You did it," Daniel said, voice shaking. Elias managed a weak smile. "Not just me. I had help from memories I thought were lost. From the men who never left me behind." Daniel looked at the tin. The dog tags gleamed, witnesses to a life impossible to understand fully. He realized that these small metal fragments, photographs, and faded names were more than reminders of war. They were proof of resilience, identity, and the courage to exist even when erased. The agents approached cautiously, their expressions unreadable. "He survived," one muttered, "against impossible odds. He is a weapon." Daniel shook his head. "No, he's a man, and he has a right to remember who he is." Elias leaned back, closing his eyes. "I am Elias Ward," he said softly, the name tasting like freedom on his lips. "I am also the soldier in Korea, the man in Vietnam, all the names they gave me. But now, I am myself." The storm began to subside outside, leaving a calm after the chaos. The rain slid down the windows in slow, quiet streams. For the first time in decades, Elias felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not complete, but enough. Enough to exist without being hunted. Enough to reclaim the fragments of his life. Daniel sat beside him, silent, witnessing the quiet triumph. No one could ever fully understand the weight Elias had carried, the lives he had lived, and the sacrifices he had made. But in that moment, it was enough to know that he had survived, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Elias reached for the tin one last time, touching each dog tag gently. "They can't take this from me," he said. "It's my story, my truth, and no one will erase it again." Daniel nodded, understanding the enormity of what had just unfolded. They had faced shadows of the past, the people who shaped Elias into a ghost, and the storms of memory. And yet he was here, alive, whole, finally, after a life that had demanded more than most could imagine. Outside, the first rays of dawn pierced the clouds. Light spilled into the room, illuminating Elias Ward, the man who had fought in 3 wars, whose real name had been hidden for decades, and who had finally reclaimed it. The world outside would never know the battles he had fought, the secrets he had kept, or the lives he had touched in silence. But Daniel knew, and in this quiet hospital room, that knowledge was enough. Elias looked at Daniel, his expression softening, peaceful for the first time in decades. "I survived," he whispered. "And you'll live," Daniel replied. Fully, finally. Elias smiled faintly, closing his eyes, letting the weight of 3 lifetimes settle into the calm of a single, reclaimed existence. The storm had passed. The war inside him had ended. And the man with no name, finally, was himself.